Hail Mizahar, and hail Shiress, who I'm reading this thread to. Um, and hail to all of you you fortunate souls who have found yourself over to the Mizahar vlog section of YouTube. Anyways, I'm going to be reading Shattered, which is a thread that I wrote with Renmei. Cyrus wants me to read this. It's kind of don't want to read it because it's going to point out all the grammar mistakes I wrote, if I wrote any. But I'm going to read it anyways. So here it goes. Shattered. Winter 3, 512. Sir Imass didn't know which was more painful, sleeping or being awake. The acolyte's body felt like a twisted knot of fire. He laid flat on the cold black floor and could not move. There was no difference between opening the eyes or closing them. The zealot's body was shattered literally. His head was always ringing in pain, as if he got hit with a fatal blow. Feverish and in extreme agony, the acolyte didn't even have the energy to shed a tear. Sir Imass's mere existence was reduced to fading from darkness to blackness. His mind was blank from the pain. He could think of nothing else. The night accepted his mortality already and was waiting for death. Twice already a dark figure entered the room and poured a liquid down his throat, which he drank readily. When the liquid was consumed, he became very sleepy, but he would always awaken in pain. After what seemed years, the acolyte was convinced his whole existence was dreamless blackness and painful darkness. He screamed sometimes when the pain was unbearable, but the extreme silence always returned. He would try to think of prayers, but his mind always slipped from his fever-induced delirium. Suddenly, Sir Imass heard the sound of dice being cast. It pierced through the silence like greased lightning. The sound startled the acolyte so much his heart started to beat uncontrollably. Silence ensued for what seemed forever. Then he heard someone walking down a stone corridor outside the door. That is when Imass realized the dice roll was an omen of the future from the gods. He was about to start playing a game of life and death. He could feel it in his bones. And thus the shattered zealot awaited his destiny. It was the dragging of metal, not the footsteps, that echoed loudest in the dungeon hall. The movement was deliberate, painful ease of passage down the dank hallway of Sahova. Imass lay a broken man, the fight torn out of him by trial after trial, torture after torture. The fight that stepped from the shadows, dragged his long sword behind it, the origin of the scrape across the stone. Cloaked, the figure gave no word of comfort or scorn, no indication of identity. The blade dropped to the stranger's feet, clanging, casting the desperate noise across the chamber like frenzied bats, flapping till they faded. A hand rose from the cloak to the lock on the cage, a key clasped between pale fingers. Turning in the lock, the cell door sprung open, but the figure stood only on the threshold. He had been the work of hypnotic suggestion to allow the pulser to deliver the prisoner's food. It was the job of the mortals anyways. The sword had been simply obtained. The newts had no need for such useless weapon. Their power remained in their minds and will, not forged by the hands of man. The sword spun across the ground, kicked to Imass and laying uselessly in the dust around his body. Reaching up, the figure pulled the hood from his head. Renmei looked down at the once proud knight, but strangely, There was no gloat in his expression, no smile poking at the edge of his mouth. There was nothing but disdain, disgust, a revulsion for the broken thing laying before him. "Look at you," he said quietly, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Sir Imass, proud Silurian knight, brought so low by Nuits." Stepping into the cage, he remained just out of Imass's reach, his eyes glinting in the dull light. "Failure to Shiress, to your people, to your city, and in more ways than you know." Circling the knight, he kicked once at his body, his foot finding hard skin and muscle before withdrawing. "What now, Sir Imass? What will you do? How will you return to your beloved Shiress a traitor?" He leaned down for a moment, darting towards Imass's head, whispering a single message before withdrawing from his reach. "What is the punishment for a knight who reveals the identity of the window to enemies?" The key of the door turned, and a flood of light entered the room. The knight closed his eyes as he adjusted to the flames from the hallway. Intense dull pain pulsated with each heartbeat. He clenched his teeth when the sound of metal clanking on stone was heard. "Food," he said weakly, but his only response was the hilt of a sword spinning into his side. He was not surprised, though, that the gods had brought a weapon for him. The presence of the cold steel in the room was appropriate, and an obvious omen for the game he was about to play. Opening his eyes slowly, the zealot was greeted with the gloomy face of Murdoch of the Zeltivan Waveguard. His face was grim and full of malice. In the knight's delirium, the hypnotist looked more demonic than human. His neck began to hurt just by looking at him. In a disgusted voice, Murdoch echoed quietly as he entered the chamber. The dark shadow of the man began to circle the acolyte. "Murdoch, I should have known you were in league with..." His voice was weak. Sir Imass was immediately put to the test with a kick to the hip. The excruciating pain made the knight grunt, almost blacking out. The kick came with damning words and a whisper. Murdoch instigated and called him a traitor and a liar. He suggested that Imass reveal the identity of the window. Righteous anger burst out of his soul when he heard Murdoch. The kick to the side and the venomous words woke up the dazed acolyte quick. All Imass could envision was himself being the hypnotist's head in, himself bashing the hypnotist's head in. He had the unquenchable desire to smash him to pieces, but he was helpless. The knight could not move. "Lies! I am no traitor. I am no failure. I took my vows. I did my duty. You know nothing," the knight said in a hoarse voice. Sir Imass denied his poisoned tongue and disregarded his lies. He was no traitor, but deep in his mind the word failure lingered. He could not admit it to himself, but the fact he lay broken in his cell meant failure. He had served his God for years and had sacrificed a lot in his life to achieve knighthood. The knight had protected the weak and defended the poor, but now he lay defeated after the greatest test in his life. Regardless, the anger beyond scope fueled him down in the dungeons. "I don't play games, Murdoch. What do you want with me?" Sir Imass knew that his statement would be just as futile as before when he fought the bear. The gods had already rolled the dice, and cold steel was present in the room. Murdoch would not let Imass continue his destiny without playing and paying. Reaching to his belt, Ren pulled out the very same flask that Neuralia had worn around her neck when she spoke to Imass that fateful day. To the Akalak's eyes, the flask lost its form and became a floating mass of undulating water, and then returned to the bottle once more. "My familiar," Ren introduced simply. "Zan. He overheard your entire conversation. The fragment of Scylla, the wind oak, delivered to me loyally." He circled around the night, strolling as he gazed over the scars and barely healed wounds Imass had been dealt. "You will rot here while I sell the information to anyone who can pay the right amount. The university, Sunbirthian thugs." His voice paused. "Ravok, all because you know so little about me." Crouching down near Imass's face, Ren sneered without mirth. "You called me dishonorable then, when we fought in Zeltiva. I admit I did not reveal my magical talents at the time, but you and your precious dogma, your useless codex, I could have killed you, and in a year they would laud me as the hero who broke the death teapot. Your entire cause, your religion, your dead god, they're all worthless. Nothing but revoking stress and honor waving flags. Self-righteous pricks." Straightening, he passed to the door, stretched, and drew both his long daggers. The light reflecting off them slanted across Imass's skin, twin messages of intent. "Well, Imass, shall I seal your defeat? Shall I reveal more of your failure? For 4 days I was unable to move, a prisoner in my own mind. In those 4 days I was taken with your plague camp. How many died on the journey, Imass? How many of your precious friends did you kill with your ignorance?" A chuckle came now, cold and pitiless. Ren turned to Imass and scowled, the darkness warping his features. "I am the cause of the disease, Imass. I poisoned your friends. I rode with you, deceived you, and weakened you all the way here, and you did nothing, could do nothing, was nothing to me." Clanging the blades together once, the sound pierced the silence between them like a small bird shriek, grating off their ears and leaping from corner to corner of the enclosed space. "Stand up and kill me, Imass. Or will I sell the fruits of your failure to every enemy you have? Kill me, or I will spread my poison to Zeltiva, to Shiress. I do to them what I did to your men. If you cannot defeat me here and now, all the lives I take will be in your hands. The blood is yours to bathe." He spit on the knight's blade. "So," he said, "show me your fabled strength. Show me the might of the knights. Show me that your justice is enough to strike me down, because if you don't, I will burn your world to the ground." The knight watched silently as Murdoch produced a tiny flask that belonged to the Conti healer that had traveled with them to Sahova. Staring at the floating form of water that was contained in the flask, the zealot's mind reeled. As explained briefly by the treacherous man, he had deceived them with a strange sorcery. Not only that, but he was threatened to sell the information to all of Shiress's enemies. Sir Imass grinded his teeth in angry frustration, for he was too weak to kill Murdoch for his words. "You dishonorable scumbag! You went behind my back and spied on me. Yahal, damn you! Tyvith, grant me retribution. You have no honor!" Murdoch bent down close to Sir Imass and told him more debauchery. Although he admitted to be honorless, he was just making excuses to dodge the issue. The villain spoke blasphemous words against the knight, against Imass's faith, and his whole lifestyle. The knight was shocked beyond a doubt that he almost forgot about his plan as Murdoch drew his daggers. You speak of your own dishonor so lightly, but you use foul magic to spy on me rather than confront me like a man. Look at you. You're a hypocrite. You call me self-righteous, but your words reveal that you are just that. Look at you, Murdoch of the Worms. You come to confront me now when your own life is not in danger. That's what children do. Only little kids who don't know any better do such actions. You are a fool. What happened at the camp? Why didn't you come forward earlier? You're a fucking coward, that's why. The knight stared at the worm as the worm doubled back with a response. Just when Imass thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Murdoch just confessed to bringing the plague into the camp. His words brought back memories of all the good brothers who died during the sickness. The fact that he had inadvertently caused the plague infuriated him even more now. Sir Imass's rage was burning white now. An anger that had not been known for millennia burst forth. He couldn't even walk. The first tears in days rolled down his cheeks due to the frustration. He had no control of the situation. He was helpless and incapacitated. He gave out a loud cry of anguish as his body twitched. Blast you! Damn you! I will kill you for this, Murdoch. I swear it on everything I love. I will see your head mounted for this treachery. Coward! The worm only taunted him some more and gave him more ultimatum. Sir Imass went rolling. Murdoch wanted Imass to fight even though he was literally shattered, and if he didn't fight then he wouldn't let down all his comrades. The knight summoned all the remaining strength in his body and reached for the sword the gods had brought him. This is my last chance to fix my wrongs, thought Imass. I die for you, my fellow brothers. Always faithful, always loyal. The knight knew that he wasn't strong enough to outright kill the craven, but he would sacrifice his own life to end it. The knight's anger fueled his body despite the status of being broken. He had one chance, one final shot at glory. Yahoo, give my body the strength to complete this one final duty in your name. I implore you. I am not perfect and I have sinned, but I have lived my life in your honor. Never once asked you for anything, but now I come to you for one final gift before I die. Give me the strength to finish Murdoch, the worm who killed the innocent, conspired against the good and just, and defiled your most sacred ideals. Yahoo, help me stop Murdoch. Sir Imass gripped the handle of the sword. Its worn leather was familiar. It was his own sword. The room had been silent for a long time now. It was time to act. It did not sound like a god. There was no thunder or cracking of stone. The room did not recoil or the air tremble. He came, but the shape was insubstantial, avoiding the thick weight of flesh and bone. Only Imass saw him behind Murdoch. Yahoo carried a man's form, but as never seen through a prism. It burned white as holiness, flickering between an echo of light and the shade of a man clad in red and gold. Over the vision, like a blessing, arced massive amber and emerald wings, made more of formless color than feather. Yahoo was not in the rage the knight felt, but the sound of wings folding and the quiet, steady voice that now governed Imass's ears. There was power, but it was covered like a short sheath. I have heard, Imass. Act in faith and a pure heart. See goodness despite evil, and keep yourself from corruption. No anger, but not hatred. The haze of Imass's mind was whipped away with the ease of breaking cobwebs, and the purging force of the god of purity came on him like a flood. There was new strength in the acolyte now, running through the single gnosis mark on his hand. He was renewed, but not impervious, given faith, but not rendered an absolute. Even so, the God had come to him when called, and waited for the night to choose his path. Closing his eyes but for a moment, the night finally got adjusted to the light. Although the room was dark,